Okay, everybody, listen up. Take your seats. We are going to get the class started momentarily. Please make sure to take out your notebooks and be prepared to take plenty of notes. I am your distinguished Professor Woody Brown, and to the right of me here,
your other colleague, Tyler BENCE.
Now, sit up, eyes forward, and be prepared to listen.
And direct your attention up front. Let us begin. Hey, all you Democrats and Republicans. This is your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad, a podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, not politics, retro video games, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. I'm your candidate, Tyler BENCE, and this is your other candidate,
Woody Brown.
How's it going?
Oh, man, good. You know what's funny is we're recording this on Election Day. But we don't know what the results are yet. But by the time this is published, well, I mean, hopefully we'll know who the next president of the United States is.
I want to apologize right off the bat. My kid is being a maniac by the sound of it downstairs, and she's banging on the baby gate. And then your kids are also home today,
Yeah,
right?
my kids are home from school. I think they're using some of the schools in our county as like election or polling places. And so, or not polling places, as
What is it called? Yeah, that's right.
Casting ballot. I don't know. A vote. It's important. And anyways, they're home, and as much as I have just kind of begged and pleaded with them to stay downstairs and be quiet, I'm really not sure what's going on. I think they're playing with, I don't know if it's like a volleyball-sized rock. Or what's going on out there, but whatever they're doing, they're having fun. So that's the important part.
Yeah, it is. It's only about fun when you're a kid. So today we are kind of veering a little bit back into the paranormal. I really thought after yesterday's episode we would.
Last week's episode.
Last week's episode we kind of veer away from the paranormal, but we just can't do it. So this week we're getting into a topic that we both really love. And it's a pretty broad topic. And I think for all you non-paranormal fans out there, I still think there's a little, real world kind of biological elements to this that, I think you can sink your teeth into. So let me start off by saying Woody Brown, not only is he an underwear model, an insurance salesman, father of two, a 17-time triathlete winner, Ironman. He also at one time majored in biology, and our topic is related to that.
Yeah, man. So I think it's important for anybody listening. First off, welcome to the first class at Rad University. I think we're going to do, the old adage, like a good cop, bad cop. I think I'm going to be the professor that really kind of digs into the biology side of some of these creatures. Yeah. And then you're going to be the professor that is like the cool, I'm
the one coming in smelling like booze and all disheveled.
You constantly have like one of those old like tobacco pipes and you're sitting in the quad reading a newspaper all day. Anyway, so I got my degree in biology, but here's the thing, and we're going to go into, and, your Professor Tyler will go further into sort of the common cryptozoology creatures and characters that we all know, and some of which you probably have known about since you were a little kid. I know that's when we were kind of introduced to them. But I'm going to talk about some that, initially people thought of as cryptids. All right. So first, I think it's important. We got to define what cryptozoology is, right?
We do.
So, do you want to take that or?
Sure. It is, cryptozoology is basically the study of hidden or unknown animals, including creatures once deemed imaginary by mainstream scientists.
Right. So anytime we reference any of these creatures as cryptids, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about creatures that, as of yet, mainstream science has kind of said, well, we don't have any solid proof that proves that they exist. So here's what's, it's just fascinating to me as someone that does enjoy biology, that some of the creatures that showed up on the list of, I guess you would call them ex-cryptids, I don't know, are so common in our brain now and just everyday creatures that it's kind of hard for me to believe that at one point people believed them to be, mythical. And so the way I'm going to kind of present this, I kind of made a little short list here, is going to be from sort of the most common to, all the way down to the sort of least common creatures that you may or actually may not have ever heard of. So the first one, this is going to blow your mind. The gorilla.
Wow.
Okay? Yeah, man. It's super hard for us, especially if you grew up in the 80s. Wasn't there like a famous gorilla in a zoo? You know what I mean? That did sign language and stuff?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
What was his name? I don't know. But
And I think he may have even been tied into Jane Goodall.
maybe.
that
She
her
did a
name?
lot of work with chimpanzees, but I mean primates in general. And she's amazing, by the way. There's an incredible documentary on Disney Plus about Jane Goodall, and she's literally one of the most amazing human beings. And I didn't mean for us to get on that side topic, but if you ever, I'm serious, man, she is unbelievable.
She sounds hot. Is she in your top 5?
I mean, dude, I actually, to be honest with you, man, when I was a kid, I kind of had a weird crush on her, man. Just, Anyway.
I love it.
So, yeah, I mean, gorillas back in the day were thought of to be like these human-like monsters that just were rarely witnessed. And there wasn't a lot of proof of their existence, essentially. No bone skeletons, really. It wasn't until like the late 1800s, early 1900s that evidence, skulls at first, but then actual witnessed accounts of gorillas happened. And even then, the mountain gorilla was one of the last things to be discovered. And that wasn't until like 1902 or something. I mean, it's just nuts to me.
Yeah.
Anybody listening to this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You go to the zoo, you want to see the gorilla exhibit.
There it is.
Right? I mean, nobody thinks of that as like a mythical creature. It's just an animal that we all know and love.
Well, and that's the thing. I think we are by no means anti-science on this episode or on this podcast, but it is a little annoying just how quickly they can dismiss these accounts. That hundreds, thousands of people have seen certain animals. I mean, for example, like in Brazil, there's I don't want to jump. I'm not jumping straight in, but this is just for example. There's one in Brazil that's called the Mapinguari, and basically it's exactly what the people that have seen it, the reports, they describe it exactly like a ground sloth. And in that area, the ground sloth died off, 60,000 years previous. But I mean, who's to say that we've, I feel like as a people, we lay claim and like sort of think, oh, well, no, we're smarter than everybody else. And we've seen and we've done it all. But it's like, just think of the amount of areas that we've never explored.
Yeah, exactly, man. And it's funny that you bring that point up because later on we'll kind of talk about in this, used to be ex-cryptids or whatever we want to call them. There's a lot of these organisms or animals that were once believed to be extinct that are still kind of sighted here and there. And, it's easy for us sort of like, quote unquote, Westerners to kind of just get used to our animals that we're used to, And in terms of like globally, really like the animals that exist, well, the proven animals that exist in in North America, for example, aren't really that exciting. I mean, go and we will visit as we go into these animals. We're going to go across the world into like Asia and Tasmania and Australia. And they're just some like crazy looking animals. Africa, there's just like these animals that are rarely seen that are, truthfully, you look and you see a picture on the internet, your first reaction is, oh, somebody photoshopped something pretty crazy here, but that's awesome,
Right, yeah.
So the next one I kind of want to talk about is actually an animal that if you just kind of erased your memory and someone just showed you a picture of this, that's exactly what you would think. Kind of rewind back in your mind to like, the 1700s and someone just kind of bringing either a skeleton or, a stuffed version of this dead animal to you, you would be like, this is not real. And that's what happened with our friend, the platypus.
Oh, yeah.
So you look at a platypus, and I mean really take a look at it, right?
Weird.
If you look at it, you're like, what happened here? Did a beaver and a duck fall in love and then have like some children, and then those children fell in love with like an otter? What is happening here?
It definitely, it definitely looks like, like a chimera of sorts. Like it definitely looks like, here's an animal over here, here's another animal over here.
Slap them together.
Somehow they
Because,
join
look,
together.
it's got like the duck kind of bill, hence the name duck-billed platypus. It's got like almost like a beaver's body, and then these like otter hands, and there's just a bunch of other cool stuff that it does. But, no joke, back in like 1799 or something, this esteemed English zoologist named George Shaw found this platypus carcass, and he even described it initially. He thought it might be a hoax. He said, on a subject so extraordinary as the present, a degree of skepticism is not only pardonable but laughable, perhaps to acknowledge that I almost doubt the testimony of my own eyes. And so when he received this carcass from Australia, he started to believe like, well, I really think it's real. But his European scientific community and colleagues really thought it was like the product of some talented Chinese taxidermists. And it really wasn't until years later that its existence was definitively confirmed and accepted. There's just so much about this creature that's super interesting. First off, it's a mammal. It is the only mammal that lays eggs. It has this like electric sensory mechanism that kind of like dolphins. It basically senses other things with that electric current. And if that's not enough, the males have a venomous spur on the back of their like hind leg.
Oh, weird. I didn't know that.
Man. Yeah, so there's just all this like, it really does fit the bill
Hey-o.
for a creature that seems, mythical, fantastic. It's not it doesn't see, it looks like the product of a kid's imagination when they're like 3, just drawing some crazy creature, boom, platypus,
Oh, yeah. And when did you say he discovered it?
Well, it was sent to him like 1799 or so. So we'll say like
okay.
1800-ish is whenever they were like, oh yeah, it is real. They sent out expeditions out there to kind of find them in the wild.
Even back in, I think the late 1800s or early 1900s, I can totally understand him thinking, oh, well, this is some kind of hoax, because that was around the era of like P.T. Barnum saying that he had like these things called the Fiji mermaid, and he would charge people to come in and take a look at this mermaid, and then later they found out it was basically a fish's body stitched to a monkey's head and torso, which is really bizarre, but so there was a lot of that going around.
Yeah, for sure. So next up on the list is actually one of my favorite animals, believe it or not, and that's the manatee.
Ooh.
So it gets kind of mixed in.
Speaking of mermaids, by the way.
Yeah, exactly, man. It gets mixed into, and I've got some beef for these sailors in just a second, but, speaking of sort of just a mythical creature, I don't know if you've ever seen a manatee.
Oh, yeah.
But, I've never seen one out in the wild. That's actually like, I really want to do that. They're so gentle. They're just giant. Can you imagine though? And I get it, being out to sea. I've never been out to sea like late at night, just staring at the ocean water. But you see one of these things, or you're just on like a riverboat in the Amazon or something. One of these things just like pops up out of the water.
Oh yeah.
That would be scary. But I got to tell you, I don't know that I would confuse these sort of bumbly creatures for like a beautiful, I don't know, Daryl Hannah from Splash. I don't.
You also though you have to look within the sort of perspective of, I don't think originally the thought of mermaids or quote unquote mermaids, like so many other things that we talk about, I feel like Disney has also sort of gave that a look that we all associate. Oh, well, that's what a mermaid looked like. So I don't, and yes, there were, early like sea vessels, and they would have like the mermaid carved on the front of the stern, bow. What's the front?
I don't know.
But yeah, they would have like the mermaid kind of deal. So yes, that was,
Like I
quite a
said,
while.
look, dude, I get it, man. Like I would probably, you're out at night, you've been working, you've been at sea for so
Right.
long, and then some, but I don't even know. I did not research. Is that part of the manatee behavior? Does it stick straight out of the water? I don't know.
See, I don't know. I think
I've never seen that.
I mean, you can kind of. I mean, I guess other than like
Like maybe if it was like behind some like sea kelp, and it's like kind of getting dark outside.
up
you
on
just
the
see this
rocks
thing
or
move
something ish. Yeah.
I don't know.
know.
Anyways, when I think of trash them all you want, but when I think of a mermaid, I definitely think of the movie Splash, which was like a multi weekend renter. Whenever I was a kid, we couldn't get enough of that movie. Boy, I had a crush, man alive.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Which, by the way, I think they're remaking Splash.
I'm not
It'll
a
be
big fan
terrible,
of-
but
not a big fan of remakes.
Yeah.
But I think that could be a cool episode, and that would be remakes that kind of not were better, but didn't ruin it.
Speaking of, and again, I don't want to derail completely like I'm prone to do, but man, I'm excited, but also a little pissed that Dune looks incredible. But now it's pushed back to like
I know 2022 or something. Maybe it's 2021. Maybe I'm
no,
wrong.
I think it's like 2 years, which is nuts.
That's okay. I got the original on VHS. All right, and I think the casting is just about as good as it gets, man. I mean, just front
it's
to back, it's
crazy
amazing.
big.
It's hard
cast.
to do better than Jean-Luc Picard himself. It's hard to beat Patrick Stewart because he was in the original one, but I think they did a good job getting
Josh Brolin.
Josh Brolin plays that character, and that's a good match. Okay, next up is we're starting to get into the creatures that again become more and more obscure and even truly more believable that they, if you saw them, you'd be like, that's not real. And this one's called and I'm going to probably butcher the pronunciation here, but it's okapi.
Oh yeah,
And so what it looks like, obviously we'll post some pictures up in the show artifacts tomorrow. But what it looks like essentially is if you blended a zebra with a donkey and a deer and an antelope, and then just put it into an animal. That's what
It's
it looks
weird.
like. It's really strange, and it's actually I think it's genetically closer to a giraffe than any of those that I just listed. But it is every now and then you can kind of see them in zoos. They're super rare in the wild. I think they take them to zoos to hopefully kind of breed them in captivity so they can repopulate them at some point.
Do you know when they discovered them or this animal? No.
But they live in dense remote rainforest in Central Africa. Yeah, and so now we're going to dive into the coelacanth,
Oh yeah.
and
I think that one's probably one of the big, pushbacks against the science community of like, oh no, you don't know everything because
see, I didn't dive too far into when it was discovered because to me, like I learned about it when I was in college, and it's been quite some time now. So, but it's really super fascinating. Number one, if you look up this creature, first off, it is kind of terrifying because number one, it's a kind of bottom-dwelling fish that is humongous. I mean, they can weigh around 200 pounds.
wow.
They have this like thick, scaly armor that they like prefer to kind of come out in the dark. And so during the daytime, if there is any light where they're located, they kind of like retreat into caves in the ocean. They have these weird sort of like fleshy fins. And the way it swims too is almost like if you imagined a primitive like lizard or something like, or just a fish with four fins, almost like feet, and you put it on land and it actually like walked. That's literally how it swims. So weird. And so a lot of scientists believe that, it is sort of like the evolutionary link between water and land dwelling creatures. And there's just, you want to talk about creatures that you would never even a million years realize that they exist. The depths of the ocean, man, is just a fascinating kingdom of just variety and just crazy predators and crazy just ecosystems that are it's just incredible stuff, man.
Well, and I mean, I think that's the thing too. I mean, I'm just looking it up here, and the California Academy of Sciences say that basically we discovered 71 new animal and plant species in just 2019. So it's so weird to me, the idea that everyone is like surprised when we find new things. And I mean, especially we're finding new species of all kinds of things in the deeper we go in the ocean. So
Well, I'll say this. I'll say that the general public is probably more surprised than the scientific community, truthfully.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I had some professors, man, I actually had a professor who discovered and named a microorganism.
wow,
Yeah, I mean,
That's
so, science, that's, if they've been in science for a long time, that's their passion, and they want to discover these things. Nothing would thrill a scientist or a zoologist more than to discover a new creature. I mean, that is just, their name gets written down in history for that, All right, so now we're going to move to a part of the world that I know so well, and we're going to dive into
Gainesville, Georgia.
no, the beautiful islands of Indonesia. So this actually has two interesting creatures. Now, again,
Hey, before I don't mean to cut you off, but before we get into this,
but I'm going to anyway. Go ahead.
can you tell the folks, and I need you to explain why you like this fruit called a durian fruit?
Well, I mean, that's a hard thing to explain.
I remember you had some at your old apartment, and you were like, "Oh man, you're gonna love it." And it was.
Well, I knew that you might not love it. I
I
just kind of
hate
said
onions.
that so you would try it.
And boy,
Here's the deal. If you've never tried durian, probably
Don't.
the best description I've ever seen was actually an episode of one of Anthony Bourdain's shows. And I don't remember which show it was or which episode, but he tries it and he describes it in such a perfect way. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but this is my description. It's like, first off, durian is super famous for being very, very smelly.
oh yeah,
You can smell it, no joke, from like a mile away. In fact, it's so like stinky, and people just kind of hate it so much that in Singapore, it's actually illegal to sell it in like an open market or anything because they don't want it smelling like that at all.
Yeah.
So where I lived in Jakarta, though, you could get it aplenty. It's weird. It's just like some of these old 80s movies that we talk about. It's one of the, so first I'll describe the taste, and then you'll understand what I mean by I just have this like affinity for it because it brings back so many memories and all this. Okay, the smell and taste. I want you to imagine like something that's rotten, onions, body odor, and then at the end of that, a little bit of sweetness in there somehow. That's what it smells like. Now, when you taste it, it's weird, man.
explain the texture though.
Well, it's kind of like a, it's hard for me to explain. It's kind of like, there's like a fleshy fruit that surrounds like a seed, but around that is almost like there's like a fibrous sort of layer that's kind of stringy outside of that. So you got to kind of get past that. If you're like a texture person, like my son would never be able to try that because of the strings.
See, oddly enough, the strings, and I'm real big on texture too, but the string part didn't bother me. It's the soft, like
It's so good, dude. It's like fruit, though. It's a fruit, like banana. So it's like, it's weird, man. I don't know.
I mean, you eat it like a spoon though. It's like yogurt
kind
something.
of, but I mean, well, you can, yeah. But I mean, sometimes you just pick up that old seed and just shove that thing in your mouth, man. Yeah, man.
No.
Oh, it's so good. So, again, every time I've tried, and I think I would love to know the science behind this. There's like some people who, because of, genetics or whatever, when they taste or smell cilantro, it's just horrific for them. They smell it differently.
See, I hate cilantro.
See, I think that's it, man.
I think it's
There's
associated with like high
like a taste bud.
intelligence.
Yeah, if you like cilantro, you're correct. If you like cilantro, very high intelligence. So there you go. 'Cause I love cilantro. What I'm trying to say is I think there might be some sort of thing going on there with durian because some people really love it, some people really hate it. And I don't
Even
know.
Anthony Bourdain, didn't he hate it?
Well, he was just kind of like, oh, man.
No. I'm thinking of
Andrew Zimmerman or whatever
Andrew's.
the guy.
Yeah.
Zimmerman? Is that right?
Zimmern.
I don't know. Anyway,
Mandela effect.
Mandela effect, man, isn't real. Anyhow, I can't believe we started talking about durian, but
Yeah,
it's
I
not
just
that I'm gonna
associate that with
encourage
Indonesia.
With Indonesia, yeah. I mean, oh God, I love Indonesian food. That reminds me, we need to have it sometime over here. I'll have my wife kind of learned how to make it because she likes it too. We ate it initially in San Francisco. This is years before there was any Indonesian restaurants in Atlanta. We went out to San Francisco, and San Francisco and other parts of California have a larger sort of Indonesian population, and so we sought that out. Man, I was like, oh my gosh, we gotta find some Indonesian food, and so she kind of learned how to cook some of it. Anyhow, we're getting
We got way out in the
here
weeds.
we go. There we go.
I'm sorry.
It's all good, dude. I kind of like talking about that stuff. It's fun to reminisce. So, anyways, here we are. We're in the archipelago, archipelago of Indonesian islands, and one in particular is the home of a creature that even has a mythical name, and that is the Komodo dragon. Now, I've seen these things in real life. They actually have them at the Atlanta Zoo, I believe, but I've seen them not in the wild in Indonesia, but they have a lot of them over there. I did, however, see a lot of their smaller monitor lizard cousins in the wild, and actually got chased by a couple on a camping trip one time. And you know, Komodos, if you watch any kind of specials on them or you look them up, man, even their jaws apparently are so strong that you wouldn't be able to like pry your arm out of it. If a Komodo latches on, boom, it's there. And its saliva and everything, its mouth is so
It's like toxic, right?
yeah,
Or
toxic,
poisonous.
man. Yeah, it houses a lot of like harmful bacteria and stuff, and so it's just bad for you if you get bit. And they're fast. They're just these fascinating creatures, man. But again, those are some that as early explorers were kind of just making their way around the globe. In Indonesia, it was the Dutch, and the Dutch were there, and kind of like these guys would write back and to Deutschland and say, you know, gosh, there's these giant dragon creatures that are on the beaches of this island, and they're like, no, there's not, you know. But turns out they're real. Okay, lastly, this is actually going to be closer to where I think we're going to be going with the cryptids that still exist, the ones that have not been discovered yet. And this is actually a relatively recent discovery. As early as like 2003, scientists think like, holy smokes, man, maybe there is something to this. So there are these folk tales in Indonesia and an island, the island of like Flores, that tell of a mysterious race of little people, what they called the Ibu Gogo.
Ooh.
And this creature, a race of people, would abduct the children in the villages and spoke in like little murmurs.
Wow.
So
See, I love that stuff.
Oh man, for sure, because like
so cool.
you know, what they discovered later was in 2003, scientists discovered the remains of like a new kind of humanoid species that they've called Homo florensius. Wait, hold on. Floresian. Floresian.
We'll cut it out.
Floresiensis.
Strong.
Floresiensis. Floresiensis, that's it. Homo floresiensis.
Nice.
So scientists have they discovered the remains of a new humanoid species they called, I'm not going to get it, dude.
Get in there. Get in there.
Homo floresiensis. Yes,
Ooh,
I said it
well
right.
done. Well done.
And it was discovered in the caves on this island. So fossil.
Wait, is this the same as the...
Orang Pandek or whatever?
No, I'm talking about in New Zealand, like the hobbits they found.
You know, I don't know if it's the same, but this one was named for that island that it was found, you know, Flores, and that was the beginning of their name. So there's probably another subspecies of the, out there in the Shire.
Yeah, exactly.
As we begin to dive into cryptids, we're going to eventually go into folklore and how it plays a role in, well, frankly, especially after the books that I've been reading, everyday life, even as Americans, all of our ancestry, whether it's Native American or going back to our European ancestry or African ancestry or whatever it is, all of this folklore exists that every now and then one of these potential cryptids is a part of. And so as you guys can see, and I'm glad that we started off this conversation with, okay, look, it's very easy as soon as someone hears the word Bigfoot. for them to say, here we go. Now, of course, not our fans, man. Our listeners are open-minded, but new listeners might not be, right? And because we talk about so many different things on this podcast, this might be an episode where they think, what are we talking about here? But that's why I think it was important that we started with this because, at some point, someone thought a gorilla was fake or a platypus, like all these creatures that we talked about. Keep an open mind. Think about it. There's so much of this world that's undiscovered, not just the ocean. But man, the ocean in particular. But it's not impossible, certainly not impossible, for there to be creatures that we have not seen yet.
Yeah. And imagine also, how we view, how we would, think of like a Bigfoot or Sasquatch or Yeti or, all the different sort of variations on that. That's exactly how that person would have felt, I'm sure, that was the first guy to see, or girl, was the first person to see the mountain gorilla. Just imagine looking over and then being, seeing this massive thing.
Now it's my turn to ask you.
Okay, hold on
and
just a second, pal.
Sure, okay.
Sorry. God, all my stupid apps just like, ugh. Sorry.
Apps? What apps? We have apps
Not
open?
apps, tabs.
Oh, web apps. Gotcha.
Get those web apps going.
Forget about that. How about this? You figure out what web apps you need for the next part of our conversation so our class doesn't fall asleep out there. Students, sharpen your pencils, get a fresh piece of paper ready, open your textbooks. We're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to dive straight in to Cryptid Zoology 101.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Yeah, so basically, when I think of cryptid, it immediately puts me back.
Hey, man, why don't you welcome our listeners back?
Welcome back, folks, foals and fillies. When I think of cryptids, and I'm sure you're probably the same, we think of the top candidates. And number one has to be Bigfoot.
Give them to me, champ.
Speaking of champ, there's Champy, the Lake Champlain Loch Ness Monster, basically. And, a lot of these things have been, it's easy to sort of view this in sort of through a modern lens, of like, oh, well, this is something that we've never discovered and it's got to be fake. But in reality, a lot of these things, are pre-1800s, pre-1700s. So there's Champy, which is kind of a big one. There's Nessie, obviously, the Loch Ness Monster. What were your bigger ones when you were a kid?
So, for me, it was obviously Bigfoot, thanks to Harry and the Hendersons.
Oh, yeah. Man, I forgot about that.
And then I think after that, somehow, I don't know, you get these library books and stuff like we've talked about on previous shows. And I think I was introduced to the Loch Ness Monster. Well, I guess Chupacabra.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I feel like that's more recent for me, though. Like, not in the last, year or two, but, maybe 20 years or so. You hear about the Chupacabra sightings and stuff. But really, it was just, Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
Both of those were kind of, especially as a kid, enough to just kind of oh, man, think about them being present and, Bigfoot maybe being out there in the woods. But, I'm kind of glad as a kid that I wasn't scared of Bigfoot. If anything, I just thought he would be kind of like Harry from Harry and the Hendersons, kind of dumb. Well, not dumb, but kind of like a gentle giant.
From what they, I can't say evidence, but, from the sort of
reported sightings and experiences. Right?
Yeah. Reported sort of data, I guess, is, that most of them, and granted, here's the other disclaimer for the show, especially coming from me. A lot of these things I don't necessarily know I don't know that they're your flesh and blood, purely, biological, corporeal sort of, bodies, basically. And, a lot of the stuff,
Hold on. So what you're saying is by you introducing them as potential biological creatures, you're just introducing them that way. But I think if listeners remember, your sort of stance on it all is they could be potentially other dimensional creatures. Okay.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, to a lot of you that aren't into
Let's
this
not
kind of
scare
thing.
him off, man.
No. But for Bigfoot, for example, I mean, there's a ton of sighting reports. There's casting like footprints. There's a ton of those out there from all across the globe. I mean, there's reports of the Yeti way up in the Himalayas, and that's my daughter screaming her head off in the
Well,
background.
I can't hear, but yeah, man. I mean, dude, there's how many different names for Bigfoot, dude?
Yeah.
Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Wok Wok.
Yeah.
There's
Yeti, skunk ape.
within United States and Canada alone, man. Like oral traditions of native tribes, man. I mean, this isn't just something that started in the '60s or something, you know?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's a guy, I think his name is Tom Slick. He was a huge expedition guy, and his whole big deal was hey, I'm going to fly to Tibet, I'm going to climb the Himalayas, and I'm going to discover this Yeti. And he actually found while he was up there that supposedly there was a monastery, way up with the Sherpas, way up in the mountains. We're talking way too cold, way too high up, way too long of a travel, to just be these silly people
Playing a prank.
Yeah, this is for the people that say everything is it's just a hoax. It's just somebody.
Now, what sucks is, and I think we've talked about this either on the show or just over the phone. What sucks is there are stupid idiots out there that do this kind of stuff as a hoax. Like, didn't you tell me about like some dude said he'd found like a Bigfoot carcass and then they filled it up with like possum meat?
Yeah, it's I think it was actually two sheriff's deputies, and they filled they kept it in their freezer, and for the longest time it was like, oh, we're keeping it quiet, we're not going to tell anybody. And I think somehow there was some kind of money involved. It was like, oh, well, we'll show you, but you have to pay some kind of,
yeah, of course,
some silly kind of thing. So yes, that is a horrible thing for the cryptid community as a whole, because not only does it discourage a lot of people from further exploring some of these things that I believe could definitely be real, it also, is just sort of one more arrow in the quiver for the hardcore skeptics to just be like, yeah, all that stuff's BS, and we're not gonna give you funding to go on expeditions. We're not gonna. It really is kind of a bummer. But I do think that as much as I think that community is looked down on, I think in the year we're living in and the time we're living in 2020, I think that it is those things are getting better and better and better. I think it's less, maybe a little less cynics, and hopefully it's because we have discovered so many new species. So
I would say I think the most recent discovery was like the giant squid, probably.
Yeah,
and not just alive though. I mean, they used to wash up on shore and stuff, but I think like relatively recent, they've gotten some like footage of a giant squid down in the depths of the ocean, because as the technology improves for being able to grab some footage down there.
It's wild. I mean, it's so funny too that you just brought that up, because I have this monster book, talking about checking books out of the library. I have a monster book that came from the library that I never turned back in, like almost all of my monster books that I own now. And that's the funny thing. On the cover is the Kraken, which is this giant squid. And later on, you find out, oh, no, that's actually a real thing. I think a lot of times some of these people of old actually did see these things. I mean, I think was it Roosevelt that had a Bigfoot?
So I think he had someone on his like hunting party. There was a guy
in his like expedition.
Yeah, that told him like an account of it, and that he ended up writing about in like a journal or something.
Right.
But he didn't do it in a way that was, kind of tongue in cheek. It was very like, hey, this is somebody that I trust very much, and this is what he saw.
And that's the thing. I mean, why would there's so many reports. I mean, especially those guys. I mean, there's a ton of sort of paranormal things tied to George Washington, and we'll get into that later.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the fact that a lot of this stuff didn't just happen in, recent history.
Right.
That it
Right.
like not only spans our country and continent, but other parts of the world that would never have been able to share those legends really with
Yeah.
one another, like in the Himalayas. And, well, I mean, we kind of touched on it a second ago. Like in Indonesia, there's a Indonesian sort of version of Bigfoot, if you will. It's actually kind of a shorter, smaller version called Orang Pandek, I think is what it's
Pandek,
called.
yeah.
And there's oh man, what's the guy's name? Daniel something. But anyway, there's
LaRusso.
no, it is something like that memorable though. I don't remember what it is, but it's like Daniel Martin or something like that. But there's active expeditions going on right now.
Oh, see, that's so cool, man.
In Indonesia, trying to find that creature, and they sort of like the theory essentially is that it could be potentially just like either kind of like we talked about a sort of not subspecies of human, but maybe a reclusive sort of like tribe of Indonesians that are super scared off by technology and stuff. I mean, I always think about that. For as long as I live, this image of, do you remember like maybe early 2000s, mid 2000s, when there was that footage of the helicopter that flew over, I think it was I think it was a part of like Borneo or something in Indonesia. And they found these like tribesmen who were like, one of them was like painted in like all red body paint, like head to toe, man, just like red.
Yeah.
And then one was like painted in all blue.
I
and
feel like there's a new documentary
like-
about this.
Maybe, man. They're like yelling and like shaking their spears at this helicopter, Think
Yeah.
about it, man. They're seeing this like flying creature in the air. And again, it kind of goes back to, the passport to Magonia stuff.
Oh,
where,
yeah.
All throughout history, there's been these sightings of things that could be, is it time travelers? Is it just other dimensional stuff? So I'm just kind of putting myself in those tribesmen's shoes, or no shoes, bare feet, and like
Loincloth.
Loincloth. I don't even think they had loincloths. I mean, they're just painted head to toe, dude. Solid colors. It's
Nice.
so cool looking.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are so many remote locations, so many different things that exist out there. I think nothing's impossible. And, Bigfoot, Loch Ness are the two really that come to mind immediately. And then there's, of course, offshoots of all that stuff.
Oh,
But
yeah.
Are there any others? Are there any others that, like, besides Chupacabra?
There's so many. Before we go into those though, real quick, you brought up when I thought this is where you were going when you said when you were talking about tribes, because this is something that's probably one of the most fascinating things to me about sort of the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yucca Man, Skunk Ape, Yeti, just all the different sort of names is, just in North America alone, every single indigenous tribe, whether it was the Cheyenne to the Cherokee to, the Lakota, Algonquin, from all across the nation, every single one of these tribes had what they viewed as another tribe of, what they would consider like wild men. Like they didn't, I guess they didn't really have the scope or the lens to view it through like we do of like, okay, well, we're humans, and then these things are, probably some sort of upright hominid, half ape, half human, Neanderthal kind of thing. But to them, they viewed this thing as another tribe of indigenous Indians, Native Americans, what have you. But they looked at these things as like another tribe of just really tall, hairy individuals. And I've always thought that was fascinating. I mean, every single top to bottom, all across the nation, every single one of these has the same kind of story of these wild men.
Well,
And
dude,
it's
what's
amazing.
interesting about that too is it kind of tells you a little bit about how they viewed nature in general, right? Because they're going to approach and respect a fellow man, even if they're different, differently than they would like sort of like an animal. You know what I'm saying though? I mean, They're going to
I mean,
fear
there were
and
some pretty
respect.
savages though that were pretty.
Oh boy, are you allowed to say savage?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Okay.
I mean, there was some hardcore.
Well, I mean, I'm not talking about intertribal battles here. I'm talking
No,
about
I'm talking about like there were like cannibals, like tribes that would full on,
Oh yeah, well, dude, there still is,
like
man.
the Comanches, I think were.
Well, I mean, there's a cannibalistic tribe in Indonesia, dude. Same thing, Borneo.
Wow.
Yes, they don't
Still
mess
there
around.
now? Like,
Oh yeah, there's also like head shrinkers, man.
whoa. Oh yeah.
This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
I mean, like literally, this is a piece of the world that is still untouched. It's fascinating, man.
Yeah. I mean, even
And
even like
I want
the
to keep it
Amazon.
untouched. Yeah.
Oh, I do too. Yeah. I mean, the amount of, again, I know I keep harping on this, but just the concept that, oh, well, there's all these, there's nothing that we haven't discovered yet. And like, I mean, just look at the Amazon. I mean, I think new tribes were discovered in the Amazon that we had never discovered in the past 5 years, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's egotistical, man.
It
I mean,
is.
just to
And
think
it's
that
such a
we
big
know
world.
everything and that there's nothing else to discover is just ridiculous. You know?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
so small-minded.
Yeah, so it those are the big guys. But there's also the smaller ones.
Well, no, I don't think this is the class for the smaller ones. But imagine there's
I'm just gonna throw a couple names
chalkboard
out.
behind you. Imagine there's a chalkboard behind you. You write down, so far we've got Bigfoot, we've got Loch Ness Monster,
Yep.
we got Chupacabra.
Yep.
I know one that we're missing, and I don't know. I mean, truly, dude, I know almost nothing about. I just haven't gotten to that part of the book yet, and that's the Mothman.
Oh God, Mothman's probably my favorite. It's from West Virginia. It's a creature that was seen in Point Pleasant from November 15th, 1966 to December 15th, which that's interesting. It's exactly a year. So there's some confusing things about the Mothman because there's sort of two stories. And I mean, I think a little bit of it had to do with the Mothman Prophecies, which was written by John Keel, who was a genius. And, he, like Jacques Vallée, he really got into the concept of maybe these things aren't nuts and bolts, UFOs or flesh and blood. Maybe they are, coming from like another dimension, or maybe we're seeing these things through sort of the veil of, or they're able to kind of pop in and out of, like a multiverse type concept. But, there was like an old TNT factory apparently, and there were two couples in a car at this old TNT factory, and they saw these two glowing eyes. Basically, they said that it had what looked like 10-foot wings.
man.
Again, all the skeptics that were like, "Oh no, it was just some sort of crane that's sort of in that local area." But yeah, they peeled out of this old abandoned TNT factory when they saw these red eyes. They saw the silhouette of this thing that had 10-foot wings. I think they described it.
Now, where is this again?
It's
What part
Point
of the country?
Pleasant, North Virginia, or
Get that
Point
web
Pleasant, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and it didn't have. Again, 1965. It didn't have like a head. They said it
gosh.
looked like it was sort of. It's kind of like the eyes were sort of in the shoulders, basically.
Yeah, I've seen that drawing, man. That is, I gotta say, out of all of the cryptids, like if you had like the top five, and that's them: Bigfoot, Loch Ness, Chupacabra, Mothman, and whoever number 5 is, top 4, we'll say.
Yeah.
This one is definitely the most terrifying to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a weird one because later they, and again, we're kind of just giving a brief sort of primer on a lot of these things. We're not, later on there will be full episodes sort of devoted to these things. We'll dive a lot deeper, but I think originally there were, so these two couples saw it and it chased them, and I think it like killed a dog or something, or they said its eyes looked like bicycle reflectors, and blamed buzzing noises from his television set and disappearance of his German Shepherd dog at the creature. This was another guy in the area. There were two like grave diggers around that little time, and you'll also get used to us saying the term flap, which is sort of a term used where this is called, from 1965 to 66. That was the flap. That was when all this stuff kind of went down. So a bunch of sort of corroborating.
A bunch of
corroborating, put them all together, and they make up this flap. So anyway, shortly after all this stuff in 1967, so the flap happened around a year, and a lot of people had a lot of different ideas. Oh, it was like a harbinger of doom. Oh, it was here to warn us, because in December 15th, 1967, there was a bridge called the Silver Bridge, and this is really sad. It was packed. I mean, the bridge was completely, full of cars, and it was between Point Pleasant and the next major city over. I can't remember what it would be, but basically they were driving into the city to get Christmas presents, and this bridge collapsed, and it killed 46 people.
Oh, man.
And they said that you could see, boxes of presents all floating in the water, which
man.
Just
That
horrible.
sucks.
Yeah, really, really terrible.
So people think that the appearance of the Mothman was in some way sort of kind of warning people that something like that was going to happen, or it just was a signal that maybe it brought that calamity with it, kind of thing?
Yeah. Actually, both of those things. There's multiple sort of deals, sort of views on that, and a lot of people were sort of torn on it. Eventually, there's the town sort of adopted it as like, oh, he was a good guy, and I think there's been sort of reports maybe here and there, like, but nothing like a confirmed sort of flap where it was a lot of people within this like small amount of time seeing it. But yeah, John Keel wrote a book called The Mothman Prophecies back in 1975, and later on there was a movie with Richard Gere, which is actually pretty good. It holds up.
I need to rewatch that. I think it's on Prime right now.
Ooh,
I remember seeing it, so I need to rewatch that.
yeah. I made my wife Courtney watch it, and
Was she
like I
scared? Like,
said-
is it scary? I just remember it being
it's-
kind of scary, right?
well, the thing is, I mean, I don't think it's scary. I mean, there's like a few parts that are kind of creepy, but it's more like a psychological type kind of deal. I mean, I think they do a really good job, though.
And I guess he plays John Keel. Is that the deal?
Well, I
That kind
think
of rhymed. That was lame.
I think the idea was that he was kind of supposed to play a mix between John Keel and I think the sheriff in the area, who was kind of a character in that, during that flap, who was vocal in like the papers and the media and stuff.
He's got a trunk of possum meat just
ready for money. But yeah, it's, eventually they, like most of these towns, they sort of adopted it as, almost like a mascot. And there's a statue, which is kind of weird. You can look it up. We'll put it in the show notes. The statue, in my opinion, looks nothing like what any of the reports. I mean, it looks kind of like a superhero. Metal.
I've seen that too. It's all, we got to go there though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would love to go to the festival. But yeah, there's like a big parade and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, he is one of my favorites. Jesus, we're going off the rails here. I think another one, which
How about this? Hold on. This is just my request here.
are we doing a two-parter?
Well, no, I just think we need to dive into these cryptid creatures one by one, and
Yep, we do.
Start kind of bringing that into the forefront of future episodes where we just maybe talk about a couple of the encounters that are reported about each one. Every now and then, because I mean, there's just so much is the point. I mean, I'm looking over here. I've got this book by Brad Steiger that is just literally like 400 pages of accounts. I mean, literally, it's just back-to-back accounts of people running into everything you can think of in terms of creatures. So, I mean, I think we give we've given them a brief introduction into what cryptozoology is, what are cryptids when they hear that, when they hear us talk about it, when they hear other podcasts talking about it, and kind of where our stance is. I mean, mine really does kind of right now lean more towards the possibility that these creatures exist is absolute to me, and that they're biological creatures, and perhaps they do have abilities that we don't know. I mean, dude, just even thinking about the platypus, or if you were to explain to someone in the 1600s how a dolphin communicates,
Yeah, exactly.
right? It seems like magic. It still seems like magic to me. I mean, and so I think so that we don't get too far into the weeds about all these accounts, because it's very easy to do because it's super interesting and super awesome.
And it's so broad, too. I mean, there's so many.
Yeah. And so many different like legends and, you know, just Bigfoot alone, man. You know, there's just so many stories in old tradition. I'm super fascinated by the stuff that happened pre-electricity. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, and not to, you know, get the fire started again, but, you know, the Loch Ness Monster, for example. I mean, I've always looked at it as, and I'm sure you have too, for the longest time I thought, okay, well, it looks exactly like what we would think of like a plesiosaur, basically like a brontosaurus, but with fins. My daughter, Amelia, is massively into dinosaurs, so she's probably going to lose her mind when she hears that because I'm saying all this wrong. But yeah, you know, basically I thought for the longest time, well, this is just some sort of an ancestor to like the plesiosaur, and somehow a small group has lived, and it's sort of a biological sort of, you know, conclusion, I guess. But then, and again, this is the thing that I think is what's so great about John Keel and the Mothman prophecies. I think it's really interesting because in all these accounts, there's always going to be the side that leans sort of into the biological, scientific. Okay, maybe they're descendants of a dinosaur or a ground sloth or something that has lived that we've sort of basically decided, oh, well, this animal's extinct and that's it. But then there's also, in almost every single one of these things, there's sort of a supernatural element, which is pretty amazing. I mean, like I was saying, the Loch Ness Monster. I mean, there was a house so Aleister Crowley is a guy who is known as the most wicked man in the world. He lived back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he was tied into a lot of different things. But he would do these rituals. You know, he was what you would think of as like, you know, a witch or a sorcerer or, you know, whatever. And he dabbled in all kinds of, you know, crazy kind of stuff. Go look him up if you've never heard of him. He's pretty fascinating. But anyway, he was known to do all these rituals, you know, these week-long rituals, probably some sacrifice involved, probably some, you know, a lot of kind of bad stuff. But anyway, so the story goes that he was trying to basically create a doorway to like another realm. So for me, I look at that and think, okay, well, probably like another dimension or like another multiverse type thing. And he lived at this house that was right on the lake of the loch, you know, of Loch Ness, called the Boleskine House. And later Jimmy Page would buy it because he was obsessed with Aleister Crowley. But he did this ritual, which is called the Alamantra ritual. And I think it lasted 2 weeks. And supposedly he opened a doorway to this other dimension. And oddly enough, right around that same time, I think it was, you know, within 2 years of this happening, the story goes that he never shut the doorway. And then suddenly we have the first sightings of the Loch Ness Monster, which is fascinating. And that's definitely
I didn't
a whole...
know anything about that.
Yeah, that's definitely a whole episode unto itself. Basically what I'm saying is like there's always... Who knows? I mean, maybe the thing doesn't exist at all. Maybe it's just sort of local gossip that turns into, you know, it becomes its own sort of folklore. Or it's biological, or, you know, as I get a little older, you know, I think that a lot of these things are sort of more supernatural.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating no matter what. Gosh, I can't wait to dive into these things one by one.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like that story, I had no idea. So, all right, folks, I think that's enough for this class. Make sure to, as you leave today, to turn in your term papers. We appreciate you being here for this special lecture. And look, if you want to sign up for extra credit, you can always go over to our Instagram page at That Would Be Rad and click the link in our bio to sign up for our very special, soon-to-be-released That Would Be Rad dispatch.
And you'll be the first to know any news or any, like, you get the inside scoop, you know, before everyone else on social media.
Once again, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for coming back week after week to check out the show and spend some time with us. And until next time,
be rad.
That's the way it goes. time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead, for you became a ghost. You always said our future would be a parade of flowers, but now all that's left is a single rose. That's the way it goes.